specific rules, and it has to be usually audio-visual in an encrypted type of situation to protect the individual. There were many that we had, and we gradually phased some of those out, but that does still exist in some services. Obviously, nursing is not something you should be doing by a computer. So,
we also allowed facilities to be reimbursed for services rendered in unlicensed facilities. And then also, along with the telehealth, we had electronic signatures, because if you're getting your services virtually, you need a way to actually sign. So electronic signatures are approved.
and for providers that are in the audience and maybe families, that can be a little confusing. If you're doing your services, they are really going to probably try to reach out to you, even outside. So you did your visit by telehealth, but maybe to try to reach out to you from that ISP and get a signature. We still want them to do due diligence to make sure that y'all are on board. But there was some confusion in the beginning, like, because we thought this was just a 2-week thing, that has something about 45 days and you can wait 45 days. Ignore that, just in case something pops up. I just don't want you to be confused.
I forgot we did that. All right. More flexibilities. So prior to COVID, or prior to Appendix K, you had less than one service a month. Then you could possibly, if you were on the CCC Plus waiver, you could possibly lose waiver services, because the idea of waiver services is that you need the services in the community. And if you're not receiving the services, so it was possible that perhaps you didn't need as much as you thought. So with Appendix K, even if you don't get a service in a month, you still keep the waivers. And that's really important for the DD waivers because it's slot based.
However, with the DD waivers, we're 2 years into this, and it's really important to understand the needs of individuals and families. We still are asking support coordinators, case managers, providers if there is a provider there, to continue to discuss that with families, document it, and the support coordinators are putting that in their record so that when the PHE ends, there are going to be, okay, it's back to normal now. We need to fully understand this. So you may be getting calls from that case manager or support coordinator to better understand what are the impediments, what is the risk, and what can we do to mitigate those.
So there are still some services that's, or some visits, case management visits, personal care, supervisory visits, and service facilitator visits that you, or as the person receiving the service, if you're not comfortable with them coming into your home, you can refuse them to come into your home. That's a flexibility. However, if there is a significant change that has happened, you really need an in-person visit so the provider or the case manager can fully assess what's happening. And just a word about the supervisory and the case management visits being virtual telehealth. We have allowed that to go on. However, it's really important that people are seen by the providers. We are almost 2.5 years into this. So it's really time for providers to be able to come and do some assessments in person, because you can't fully get the full picture virtually. So I know some of you may still be uncomfortable having a provider in your home. We've got some things up on our website to help with some of the distancing, where we encourage wearing masks, but we really want to encourage you all to work with your providers to find a safe way for them to see you in person. Yes, ma'am.
For service like peer mentoring, for example, where it's slightly different, it might not be as more hands-on. Is there the possibility that could remain telehealth?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I'll take this question, but then we're going to hold the rest of them so we can get through it. Yes, sir.
He thinks DMAS could save a lot of money if DMAS would do away with service facilitation. Because it really doesn't benefit the consumer.
It's supposed to.
Yeah.
Let me say that. It is supposed to benefit the consumer. And I definitely take the words to heart because we think that we're working on service facilitation. No two providers are alike.
Right.
And so there are things that we are looking at around service facilitation to strengthen that service because it should benefit you. They should be a person, when you're consumer directing, they should be the person that you call if there's something wrong with your authorization, or even if perhaps if there's something wrong with someone didn't get paid. They are your support. They are your support system. And if they're not supporting you, then that's something we need to work on. Okay. All right. So like let's get through the slides and then we'll have a lot of time for questions because I don't think we have a lot to say because there hasn't been a lot of
And I
updates.
talk fast. I had coffee.
She does.
Yeah, there you go. Now I'm hungry too.
Cheryl Roberts mentioned that during the PHE or Appendix K, legally responsible individuals could be reimbursed. That remains through the end of the PHE. We're going to talk about what it looks like permanently a little bit later, but right now we're just telling you what currently exists. There is a flexibility that allows personal care respite and companion agencies to hire before they actually, and it gives them a span of time for the aide to get the 40-hour training that's required. So they get more time to complete some of the standards that we have. And then for residential providers, they don't have to comply with the HCBS settings requirements that allow people to have visitors at any time. And that's related to COVID.
But I want to be clear. Providers, case managers are not visitors. This is, and it's a good or bad, right? You know, residential providers are trying to protect the individuals in the home. So they can say, you know, your boyfriend can't come over. That's what that rule is allowing them to do. Or, you know, the mailman can't come in. I know you usually like to sit down and have coffee with him, but he can't come in because I need to make sure that you're safe. It does not include a residential provider saying case manager cannot come in to monitor services.
Okay. Sorry. All right. And who want to talk about this? It's your slide. Assessments and visits.
And there's people in the waiting room apparently in here.
Oh,
How do we let
there's
them
people in the
in?
waiting room.
If
Oh,
you click on that, you should be able to just hit admit. Like if you click on that little box view.
Okay, up at the top.
up at the top.
Oh,
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you click view,
You.
and then you should be able to admit those.
Okay. Admit.
Messages.
Admit
Admit all.
There you go.
All right.
And
Okay.
just look for please mute. Thank you. Yeah, makes it easy.
Let's
I think it might be the one under.
Next one down.
next.
Okay, I think we're good.
You can mute them there.
Thank you guys for the Zoom lesson. We use Google Meets, so we don't know all of the. I'm sorry, I just really don't.
Mute all, there it is.
Where, mute all? Mute all. Sorry. I promise you, I'm not this technologically.
Uncheck that unless you want that.
No,
No,
no.
no. All righty.
Good job. Yeah, everybody's muted.
Mute all.
Unclick the box.
Oh,
okay.
okay. There you go. I promise you, we do know technology. We just don't know technology.
You go. Carl. Okay, assessments and visits. Let me get over here so we can see. So part of the process, and this has changed, we're just sort of reiterating it to you. It had started changing when we were here last year. The CIS, for some of y'all that are on DD waivers, some of the NCI studies about quality and stuff like that coming in, they had been paused and they were trying to start those in person again when we were here last year. So all of those you need to start doing. They are all in person now. Now with support coordination and case management, if you as an individual are medically compromised and really can't have that support coordinator in, you need to tell them that it is only at your discretion as a consumer of services to allow them not to come into your home or do a face-to-face, right? I mean, please use all of the precautions because like she said, it's been 2.5 years, but some people weren't seen up to 6 months prior to it going into place. So some people haven't been seen in 3 years. So we really need to make sure that people are safe, they're getting what they need and so forth, because there's been some horror stories out there. So those are in person, should be kind of going along, but I just wanted to reiterate, if you as an individual receiving services are uncomfortable with that, you can ask your support coordinator for some sort of accommodation. Stand on my front porch. I would rather you not come home, but it is only at your discretion, not to theirs or your service facilitator. Okay, well, I said both. I'm getting there.
There we go. All right. All right. So I get to talk about consumer direction. Let me just start with, yes, the rate's not enough. The rates are set by the General Assembly. So the time to advocate for rates is around the GA. I will say that there have been rate increases. There's generally consistently rate increases, but if you start at a low amount, 12% may not look like much. 7.5 may not look like much. There have been some gains though. So with the incremental rate increases, we also started sick leave last year. So providers or attendants are able to get up to 40 hours of sick leave. And then there's overtime. People can work up to 16 hours of overtime. So while it's not a pretty picture, the picture is getting a little bit better. So the rates right now as of July 1 are $12.70 for the rest of the state. That's anything that's not Northern Virginia. And in Northern Virginia, it's $16.45. And that's for all consumer directed personal care, respite, and companion. The last week of June, someone else in the waiting room.
That would be easier.
Admit, yes.
Sorry.
Look, I'm catching it.
That's what we need.
Yes, catching on. The last week of June, attendants who worked during the first quarter of last year. So when I talk about quarter, I'm talking about fiscal year. So from last July to September 30th, they worked any. They received $1,000 supplemental payment at the end of June through their fiscal agent. If you can hang on just till we get to the end.
Oh, it was $600.
Okay, so here's the thing about supplemental payments. The IRS comes first. So now when tax season comes, most of the attendants will get that money back. But anytime you do just a general bonus payment, it's going to be taxed a little bit harder. It's going to be taxed a lot harder. All right.
Nice answer.
The tax man gets in line.
He stands in line first. Do you want to talk about AT or do you want me to talk about it?
Come to our session at 4 o'clock. We can talk a little bit about AT, EM. They are both available under both waivers, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was the new with CCC Plus waiver when they
Right.
revamped it. This has really brought light to the need for AT. Sure, everybody has needs for environmental mods too, but really about AT, and we want people to be able to access telehealth services, whether it's with your doctor or whether it's with your DD waiver services. So we really want people to try to get to that. Now, we also had DME expand. It was either during COVID or just before COVID, expand the array of devices that they might actually pay for. So usually, at least on the DD waiver side, you're going to need to go through your healthcare, Medicaid first to see if it's covered, because there have been a lot of changes. And of course, our service off consultants don't necessarily know every little thing that could be approved. So if you go through your regular state plan Medicaid and it's something that's not paid for, we can pay for it potentially under DD waiver as long as medical necessity and all the other things are met. So
I know we get this question quite a bit on if you are in fee for service, meaning that you get your services straight through Medicaid and you're not involved with a managed care organization. You have CCC Plus waiver. How do you access AT and EM? Okay, so there are providers on our website. And yes, we know that it's on our website, but it's buried a little bit. We're working on it, Lucy. But you have to go and search for providers of AT and EM. And once you locate a provider, then they will work with you to facilitate getting whatever device or whatever home modification you need. If you have trouble, and I don't know if we have it at the end of the slideshow, but there is a mailbox you can send an email to and we will help you. It is easy, CCC Plus Waiver. Make sure you put waiver at the end because the other CCC Plus goes to the managed care folks. So CCC Plus Waiver at dmas.virginia.gov. We can help you if you're getting your services through Medicaid and are having trouble accessing AT and EM. And that's for the CCC Plus waiver. Plus spelled out, yep. CCC Plus.
and Virginia spelled out.
Spelled out, yep.
Might be a good idea to ask him to distribute that to the folks who get it, so people are directly getting that URL.
That's a good idea.
That's one way people are opted out of the MCO is to take out.
Right.
And so those are the we can get besides just the folks who are used to it.
That is a good idea. That's something we can do.
Now it's my turn to give good news too.
Thanks.
So thanks to the generosity of the General Assembly. Okay, quiet class. Oh, we got anybody else coming?
Is this somebody?
Don't know what it is.
I don't know what that is.
I don't either. Somebody calling me because we're so popular. DD waiver rate increases. So we got increases effective for dates of service on or after July 1. What date is it? It is August 2nd. Have you been paid? No. Why? Because it's not loaded in the system. Unfortunately, our General Assembly did not approve, or somebody didn't approve. It didn't get approved. The budget didn't get approved until late June. So we have to do a lot of things behind the scenes to make sure that the rates are accurate, make sure they're loaded into the system. So as a provider, you can bill. Thank you. I heard the ding, ding, ding. And would you just come up and operate this? So a number of services got, not all the DD waiver services got those. There is a Medicaid memo, and Cheryl referenced this in her presentation that hopefully will be out this week. We'll see. I've commented and sent my comments back, but just about everything is getting an adjustment in rates. Now there are 3 bucketed things, and I can't remember if that's one of the slides. Let's see if I can make it go down. Okay, I think it might be on a later slide. So there's 3 bucketed stuff that she talked about. You got your personal care rates, you got the DD waiver rates, and then you have the continuation of the HCBS ARPA 12.5%. It's now in state budget. It's not ARPA like it was before for a year. ID case management is under the HCBS 12.5 continuance. DD case management, 2 very different things, is under the DD waiver rate increases. So in the Medicaid memo, it will lay out for you what those rates are if you're a provider. If you're an individual, you don't care. You just want your services. But the hope is from those rate increases, that will continue to maintain what we do have and hopefully expand services. Because some got some big increases. There was one that got a 74% increase. And you heard Kyle talk about the nursing stuff. So I think that was the one that might have gotten a 74% increase. Personal care rates, also talked about that, 7.5%. Those services are excluded from the DD waiver rate increase because they had their own provision. Does that make sense? So it's not that they, had whatever 12.5 and then that was taken away or kept, and then they got the DD waiver and they're getting the 7.5. They were excluded, went to the rates that were in place July. No, actually, y'all got a rate increase in January.
5%, and then it's a 7.5.
And then add the 7.5 over that. Again, I believe that memo has already posted and out and on Medicaid's website, so you can look, see what the actual rate is. If you're a provider, you're individual, you don't care. Except for maybe your consumer directed services. Legally responsible individuals providing services. This is a joint effort.
Okay.
So we did talk about this earlier. That was one of those Appendix K flexibilities. General Assembly was kind enough to say, we really think that this is important. We want that to continue. To Cheryl's point, there's a lot of stuff in Appendix K that we have learned that were quite beneficial, like the telehealth options. We wanted to carry through. However, things are not going to look exactly the same way. A lot of Appendix K flexibilities were done in haste. We're going to just do everything. We're going to do telephone. And because we wanted people to maintain their services. And now we have to take a critical look at what really can be done via telehealth. What guardrails need to be in place to ensure that CMS approves it, because they can go, no, we're not going to approve that. So we really want to protect the individuals, make sure that they're getting choice and that CMS has their questions answered.
Yes.
Did I do that right?
You did.
Excellent.
You did.
You need me all the time with coffee. So anyhow, just so you know, the language for that was July 1st. Again, budget was not approved until late. We have to come up with a process. We also have to ask CMS. We can't implement something in the waivers at minimum unless we get approval from CMS through our amendments. Then comes regs and manuals and whatever else, but we have to get CMS authority.
We're at question time and I see a hand already. Yes.
Two questions. Is there a list of assistive technologies that are available?
There is not, partially because it is ever changing. I mean, you can get a generic, but there could be something that you make us aware of or like, didn't know that existed. So we have purposely not, well, there is on the DME side, but under DD waivers, we've not said only this, because it could be, ask Karen, she has a member who is on cutting edge of technology and finding stuff all the time. We're like, oh, that's pretty cool. So we've tried to be careful not to do a list because then it boxes you in.
The second question is, if you have parents providing the support and the child turns 18, what happens?
So prior to COVID, parents could provide services for people over the age of 18. So there was not a rule against it. So if they turn 18, then you don't need the
For
flexibility.
who they were not legal guardians for. If they went and like did something, that could change, couldn't it? I could be wrong.
Well,
Well, now, an 18-year-old who's still in high school.
they're still technically 18. And so, and if you're not,
Yeah.
yeah,
Think about your regular kid. My three boys, Lord help us, they really aren't adults, but they were 18 and technically in the eyes of the law, they can go to war, smoke cigarettes.
yes, they do. I think
Hope, you hope.
Federally, you're allowed to have a guardian, like it's actually in the state.
well, they're
I
different.
think the math said different, but I think.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna get you and then I'm gonna come to you.
Okay, my question is, I work for an adult, I work for a nonprofit that does,
Would you mind standing up just so, because we tend to project a little bit better?
I work for a nonprofit that provides sponsor residential group home services as well as day support. So my
Okay.
question is, when it comes to the assistive technology,
Mhm.
how long would the waiting period be if we had to make changes as far as if we had to ask for one of our persons to get assistive technology? How long would the waiting process be to find out whether they're eligible for that, or what would be the specifics as to what they could get?
Right, so there's not a time frame necessarily. The process is Billy Joe Bob wants an augmentative communication device and lives with your sponsored residential. So he would go to his support coordinator or you as the provider and say, hey, I really think, or you may have recognized the need. Go to the support coordinator. Hey, I really think here's a justified need. They look at it, they get assessed. Yes, this is what he needs. They facilitate finding a provider that might order that, or it could be something that they do themselves. They ask the case manager for a service. This is DD waiver, because that's what you are. Ask for a service authorization for the item to then be purchased. So service auth usually takes 8 to 10 days, I think, from date of receipt to reviewing it. If it's really good, you got everything in there, they should be able to approve it. The provider and the individual would then know that it has been approved because their notice sent out. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just thought maybe it would have been a long amount of time because we had to decide what this person was, whether it was available to them.
It depends. So there are some that you need to look at medical necessity. If someone's in there, I'm trying to think of something that might be a little bit easier to demonstrate that. Sometimes it can't, maybe an augmentative communication device might take a little bit longer because it needs an assessment. That's not about getting your authorization and getting the item. It's about showing that the individual meets medical necessity and needs this particular item that's appropriate to him. And that can be two different buckets, but maybe it's a smart light switch or something that they want because they're in their own room, they're in their own apartment. This helps facilitate community integration and independence. That might be something that's really easy. Hey, I want a smart plug light or whatever, and then they can go through without some technical assistance.
Excuse me. We have had a request from people who are virtual, and they are asking if the question could be repeated.
Yes.
Or maybe stand up, project for folks to come here. Thank you.
Yep, I'll take her question and then we'll check the chat box.
I have two questions / comments real quick. The first one, under these DD waiver rate increases, it says the private duty nursing and skilled nursing are increased.
Yes,
So is that now a different rate if you have a DD waiver and you're receiving nursing as opposed to if you have a CCC Plus waiver?
No.
and you're receiving nursing? So the rates are still the same for both waivers, but they were increased. Okay. The other question / comment I had, I'm in Northern Virginia and I've talked to a couple families now who've been using the Appendix K to have parents paid as attendants under attendant care. Parents can't be paid under respite care. But Anthem has been denying respite care to those families totally because the parents are now providing attendant care. So for like my daughter, my husband provides attendant care, but we still use respite care providers. So there are parents who are now getting denied respite services because they are the paid attendant. And I don't know if that's happening in other areas or if it's just Anthem or.
That's been happening with our,
That's so tricky.
we're support coordinators.
Yeah.
And the parents that have been getting paid as attendants aren't getting respite approved.
So the question for the people online is, there's been some issues with certain MCOs or maybe even DBHDS denying respite for people who are legally responsible individuals who are getting reimbursed. I think some of the issue there is that respite is for the unpaid primary caregiver. And that's where the rub is. And so it's not crystal clear on how to navigate that. Now, when we go to CMS to make this rule permanent, we will work on what that should look like. But I'm sure that that's what the issue is, that the unpaid there's no unpaid primary caregiver.
Well, but
Okay.
if you have a situation where the mother, for example, is the unpaid primary caregiver, the husband serves as an attendant during COVID, they should get respite if the respite provider is not the father or the mother. If it's an outsider, right?
Well,
The parent
There's
can't
no-
be the respite provider anyway.
right, the parent can't get paid as the respite provider. But I think the question is coming down to, is the person who is truly the caregiver actually being paid? So that's one of those things that we really need to work out. Like Ann said, when we did Appendix K, a lot of this stuff was done in haste. So there wasn't a whole lot of thinking down the road of what it looks like, because I don't know that any of us thought it would be this long. But that's something we definitely have to think through and put out whatever the guideline is going to be, so everybody understands it. Right now, I think the people who are doing service off are trying to think through it.
I'm getting my respite pay. My husband is getting paid as an attendant, and we had somebody for 2 weeks this summer that did respite. Now, we're not through the managed care because we're HIP, but Consumer Direct Services has paid our respite.
People on the computer,
Okay.
we're just talking about examples of where things are being paid for, not that are personal examples.
So yeah, like I said, clearly this is something that we really need to think through and figure out what the guidelines are, so everybody is getting the same thing consistently. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
So Miss Lipford says, can a consumer receive CD care and agency care at the same time, like partial CD and partial ADC? So let's be clear. There are very few services that can be provided at the same time, same room. She and I are buddy. We're doing it right now. No, very, very few services can that happen with. There are some. Can you have authorizations for CD services and agency directed care services? Yes.
Yes.
I know on our side.
Yes.
Yes. And there are other services that are similar to that too, such as personal care and nursing or something like that. So you might have an authorization that says July 1st to October 1st, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 services that are happening. They can't, if your personal care attendant wants to be same time as the nurse or your day support provider, that's fine. One of you's got to pick which is going to bill. Hopefully that answers the question.
They can do it the same day, different times.
Yeah, so there are some services that do that, right? So maybe there's CD from 9 to 12, and then from 1 to 5, it's AD
Agency.
or some other
Yeah.
question of that.
Yeah, so I'm a residential provider, but this is actually totally on the CCC Plus side of things, because I deal with that in my personal life. And you mentioned that now attendants are allowed up to 16 hours of overtime, because I thought it was only 8.
The question is
up to-
clarity around, is an attendant allowed 16 hours of overtime, up to 16 hours of overtime now?
Yes, an attendant can get paid for up to 16 hours of overtime if they are not live-ins. Live-ins don't qualify for overtime, and there is no limit to how many hours they can provide.
Okay, so that's not clear. So that was gonna be my other question. So a live-in attendant can provide over 40 hours? a week?
Yes.
That needs to be clarified
Well,
in
it-
a
it's in
lot
the
of the
memos.
stuff, because it's not clear, and I think people are really stuck with how many hours live-in attendants are providing and how they're managing all of those hours together. The other thing I've experienced with the CCC Plus side of things on the managed care side is reduction, appeal, reduction, denial. And they're saying, and this is the caveat that they're using as the reason for reduction, personal attendants can't do medical services.
Mhm.
However, then their argument is your person doesn't need as much medical services, or this is a medical services and they can't provide this. And So it's a really convoluted way for them to deny services when they're not really even evaluating. I've had letters from my service facilitator. I've had letters from my care coordinator saying what's needed. I watched the care coordinator fill out the assessment form that says all of the things that are needed. It says in there that supervision hours are allowed. I have a daughter who cannot be left alone safely. She's 15, but does not have the skill set to be left in the home alone. There has to be somebody there. I work a full-time job. Some of you in here know me and know that I work a full-time plus job. So it's impossible for
Right.
people to provide services.
So there are guidelines around supervision, and if there's no one in the home and the person can't stay at home alone, then supervision should be approved.
And I got denied for it.
So we need to make sure that we can talk after this, because we need to make sure that, while things may be allowed, all the ducks have to be in a row. And a
We
lot
sent
of
a letter
times,
from my employer, my husband's
You did send
employer,
letters?
We sent in all of them.
All right.
So that-
did you go through the appeals process?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
this one just happened, but I had done that prior and I'm getting ready to call the ombudsman because I don't know where else to go.
Yeah, if we can talk afterwards, that would be helpful.
Same.
The question I have surrounds environmental modifications, for example, and I believe one of the guidelines says it needs to be the cheapest thing or the most cost effective that can be done. So, for example, and we'll use a ramp. Somebody needs to get into their house, and the ramp itself is going to cost $6,000. Okay, so maybe the family is going to front, you're gonna only pay $5,000 of that, gotcha. But they're gonna come in a different way. Well, DBH is denying that, along with your appeal people. Because if it exceeds the $6,000, even though you're paying only 5,000 of it, they're gonna say it's not the most cost effective way, because it costs $10,000 to do something else, even though you're only paying $5,000, period.
Mhm.
That makes sense? Yeah.
Sort of, except it's specific case, so I don't know.
Yeah, we would have to look at it
Let's
specifically.
say that we put an elevator in a house and you're gonna go through a garage. You're gonna access it through the garage. DBH is gonna say, you could do a ramp cheaper and the ramp could be put in at $6,000. And this elevator over here is gonna cost $20,000. Okay, you only are gonna pay $5,000, period.
Mhm. Right.
But they're
I see what
going
you're
to
saying.
deny it because they're gonna say it's not the most effective way. See what I'm saying?
I don't,
Does
I'm
that make
not,
sense?
that makes sense.
It does.
But
I'm telling you.
I don't think, well, and you're using elevator, I don't know, it could be a ramp versus someone putting 3 steps in
or
the back, I don't
a
know.
lift or something like that.
An elevator is,
elevator to get
I don't
into
think
a
an
home.
elevator is disallowed. There is nothing that says that's disallowed. So that's something we'd need to take back.
Yeah.
I only say that because I think that's something
Yeah.
that needs to be kind of worked out. I mean, if the family is willing to pay
Mhm.
above and beyond.
Yeah,
What the cost is.
what difference does it matter to us,
Yeah,
right?
what difference doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
And
think
you're
that's-
wanting to stay for probably better, more efficient option for your
Right.
family member.
That's
Right.
I
exactly
get what you're
right,
saying.
but I
Yeah.
can tell you, your
But I'm not
appeal
sure.
division and DBH denies it.
Yeah, I think it's because of
To show
the.
that the work is done and that the money's went towards.
I
We
think
gotta
you
talk this
stumped-
out a little
you
bit.
stumped us a little bit.
Yeah.
Let us get back with that. We can send a response.
I'm gonna go to the question, I think it was Mrs. Lipford that had this, what criteria would my son need to meet for, we're not gonna talk about the criteria for services. They are readily available out there. Please work with your case manager or support coordinator or care coordinator, depends on where you're getting the services, as to whether you might meet private duty, skilled nursing. It depends on what your needs are. Private duty tends to be a longer term, longer day. Skilled nursing is more intermittent, 20 hours a week at most, kind of coming in there and making sure things are being done, the caregivers providing appropriately, whether that be a family member or, a DD waiver provider or something. So it could, there are very specific activities that are allowed for private duty and what the individual basically has to show medical necessity. And I think someone mentioned that too. I want to make sure that you know that medical necessity doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as a medical need as what we think medical. You go to the doctor, I've got a cough, I need, it's not really the same. It's really about the services and the needs and can you benefit from the services. So I don't know who had their hand up next. I'm going to start in the back and then work my way up. So back, you, Steve. Okay. You. Stand up, please. Project.
So I do case management for a nonprofit. So one question I've been trying to find the answer to is how long does somebody on the CCC Plus waiver have to start services before they lose their waiver?
So CCC Plus waiver it's a lot more lenient than it is on the DD waiver side because there's no wait list. So there's not a defined time frame as far as I'm concerned. So is this in
One thing
relation
that
to?
I'm having trouble with for one of my clients. I was given a list of providers to choose from. I pulled multiple ones and they're saying now that we don't provide services. We don't provide services. And so it's taking a lot of extra time. Or then they're saying, we'll contact people and call you back, and then they're not getting back to me. And I'm just wondering about him getting penalized because these people are, changing their mind, but they're still on the list. And so that's one thing that.
Yeah, so on the CCC Plus side, he wouldn't lose a slot because of that.
Okay.
Can someone provide clarity, maybe you, as to when the session is supposed to end? Because we have
Right.
another session and technically. Okay, we're done. Because we have to go to another room. It's not in this room. And it is 3:45. I want to encourage y'all, Steve, I know, hold on. I will answer to your question, Steve. Just if folks need to go, if you want to send your questions to us, please feel free or get them to Lucy. Lucy gets